It started with a wrong number, a simple misdial on a rainy Tuesday evening that I almost didn't answer, my screen flashing with an unknown local prefix as I chopped vegetables for a lonely dinner alone in my kitchen that always felt too big and echoey for one person. The knife thunking against the wooden board in a rhythm that seemed to sync perfectly with the slow, persistent dripping of the faucet I'd been meaning to fix for weeks, each drop a tiny metallic punctuation in the thick silence of the house, a silence that felt less like peace and more like waiting. A man's voice, calm and pleasantly deep, with a slight, unplaceable accent that smoothed the edges of his words, asked for Amaya. And when I said, slightly irritated at the interruption to my solitary ritual, that he had the wrong number, he apologized smoothly, but then he lingered. His silence filled not with the expected click of disconnection, but with the faint, humid, staticky crackle of an open line, a sound like distant insects or far-off radio waves. And he said, just as I was about to pull the phone from my ear, "Your voice is nice. Softer than mine." I laughed it off, a nervous, clipped sound that felt foreign and too high in my own throat, and hung up, but my fingers were slick on the phone's cool surface, leaving greasy smudges on the glass. The rain intensified outside, sheeting down the window over the sink, turning the world beyond into a blurry, impressionistic watercolor of grays and greens, and I tried to shake off the encounter, telling myself it was just a harmless oddity, a random glitch in the mundane circuitry of modern life. But the specificity of his compliment burrowed under my skin, a tiny seed of disquiet. The next night, precisely at 7:03 p.m. as I was scrubbing a pot, the steam fogging the window, the phone rang again, the same unknown number glowing like a sickly jewel in the dim kitchen, and my stomach dropped before I even swiped to answer, a primal warning. It was him, not asking for Maya this time, but saying in that same even conversational tone, "You're making pasta again. The store-brand kind in the blue box. Try adding a pinch of nutmeg to the sauce. You'll like it." My blood turned to ice water, a cold flood that rushed from my core to my extremities, and the package of dried spaghetti slipped from my suddenly numb hand, hitting the edge of the counter and scattering on a linoleum floor like a cascade of brittle pale bones, because I was making pasta, the water just beginning to boil on the stove, and the box was indeed blue, and my kitchen window, a square of yellow light in the deepening blue dark, faced nothing but my own small, high-fence backyard, and the thick, encroaching line of woods beyond. No neighboring windows close enough to peer inside from any angle. I tore the curtains shut with a violent rustle, fabric rings screeching on the rod, my heart hammering a frantic, off-kilter tattoo against my ribs, and I called the police with trembling, fumbling hands, my voice thin and reedy as I explained the impossible detail. But the officer on the line was politely dismissive, his tone weary, suggesting a coincidence, a lucky guess, or a prank from a friend who had been to my house for dinner recently. But friends don't know the secret, silvery scar on your left knee from a childhood bike accident, a detail he whispered the following evening when he called as I was clumsily bandaging a fresh paper cut, saying, "The left knee, right? The one that aches when the weather turns, like a little barometer? From when you were 7 and tried to jump the curb on Elm Street. You cried not from the pain, but because your new red sneaker was scuffed, and your mother said they couldn't be cleaned." That's when the real terror set in, a slow, creeping paralysis that started in my gut and spread outwards, turning my limbs to lead, because that scar was under my clothes, invisible even in a swimsuit, a memory even I had half forgotten, buried under decades of other, more important moments, a private footnote in my own history that was now being quoted back to me by a stranger in the dark. I changed my number the next day, a frantic, sweaty-palmed ordeal at the cellular store, filling out forms with jerky handwriting. And for 3 blessed days, there was silence, a fragile, glassy piece I clung to like a lifeline, jumping at every creak and sigh of the old house's settling bones, sleeping with the bathroom light on and a baseball bat next to the bed, my dreams filled with static and whispering. Then on the 4th day, a plain white envelope arrived, no stamp, no postmark, just my name and address written in neat, blocky letters that were not my own, hand-delivered to my locked mailbox at the end of the gravel drive. Inside, on a single sheet of matte photo paper that felt cold to the touch, was a slightly blurred, high-angle photograph of me, asleep in my own bed from the night before, my face pale and peaceful on the pillow, the comforter pulled up to my chin, my hair fanned out. The caption was neatly written beneath in that same precise, mechanical hand. "You talk in your sleep." You said my name. And that was the worst part, the thing that finally unspooled my sanity thread by thread, leaving me hollow and vibrating with a dread so profound it felt like a new kind of gravity. I didn't know his name. He'd never said it. But in the photo, on my nightstand, next to the half-empty glass of water I always kept there, was a small, ornate frame holding a picture of my grandmother, and in the reflection on the curved surface of the water glass, barely visible but undeniable if you tilted the paper and squinted into the shadows, was the faint, smiling outline of a man standing in the darkened doorway of my bedroom, his shape a solid void against the dim hallway light, one hand resting casually on the doorframe, a man who knew the taste of my dinner and the map of my skin and the sound of my sleeping voice, a man who had never, technically, called me by the wrong name again. The wrong number, I realized with a chill that has never left me, a chill that now lives in my marrow, was never for Maya. It was always for me. The dial tone, the ring, was just his way of knocking, a courtesy before he simply let himself in. And the most terrifying question of all, the one that keeps me staring at my reflection in every dark window, is this. If he was in my bedroom doorway, watching me sleep, who was I talking to in my dreams? The first time I noticed him was on a crisp autumn Saturday morning, the kind where the air smells like damp leaves and wood smoke, and my breath plumed out in front of me in steady, rhythmic puffs as I settled into my usual 6-mile loop around the perimeter of the sprawling city park. He was a distant figure in a plain, gray hoodie, standing unnaturally still under the skeletal branches of the massive oak tree at the far end of the meadow, just watching. Not stretching, not looking at a phone, just a sentinel carved from fog and wool. A flicker of unease, that primal itch between the shoulder blades, made me pick up my pace, but I dismissed it. The park was public, popular with dog walkers and cyclists, and solitude often breeds paranoia. But the pattern coagulated into chilling intention over the following weeks. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening at exactly 7 p.m., as the streetlights flickered on with a dull orange hum, he'd be on the same wrought iron bench by the scummy duck pond, head bowed, the glow of a phone screen illuminating the underside of his hood as I power walked past after another draining day at the office, my own headphones blasting podcasts to drown out my thoughts. On Saturdays, without fail, he'd be the one leaning against the rusting, moss-flecked water fountain near the trailhead as I laced up my shoes, a static part of the scenery. I never saw his face. The hood was always drawn up, his posture perpetually slumped, a human smudge against the vibrant greens and golds of the park, but I felt his attention like a physical pressure, a cold spot moving with me through the sunshine. After a month of this silent, relentless shadowing, the fear curdled from nuisance into genuine terror. I changed my entire routine, driving 20 minutes across town to a new, busier trail that ran along a manicured riverwalk, my lungs burning with the effort of the run and a giddy, desperate relief that lasted for 2 whole weeks. Then, one drizzly, gray morning where the mist clung to the river like a shroud, I saw it again. The same gray hoodie, a darker gray blob in the diffuse light, perched on a wet bench at the exact 2-mile marker I just started using. He was facing the river, but the angle was all wrong. He was positioned to see the trail in his periphery. My breath hitched, a painful stitch forming in my side as adrenaline flooded my system. I didn't just run. I fled, the slap of my sneakers on the wet asphalt a frantic panic staccato that sounded like a second set of footsteps chasing me all the way back to my car, where I sat shaking, the windows fogging with my panic breath. That's when the digital breadcrumbs began, a silent invasion more violating than the physical one. A new follower appeared on my private, locked Instagram account at path_watcher_01, a blank profile with no posts, no bio. The day after I blocked it, the account posted its first and only image, a perfectly composed, almost artistic photograph of the old oak tree in my original park, taken from the exact spot he always stood, geotagged to that precise coordinate. My blood ran cold. Then came a friend request on a niche fitness app one barely used, one that used GPS to meticulously chart my running routes with a squiggly, glowing red line. He'd found me there, too. My own data, my paths, my distances, my personal benchmarks, was being weaponized as a compass pointing relentlessly back to me. I deleted every app, scrubbed my social media, and told no one, the fear curdling into a hot, shameful secret I carried in my gut. The final run was an act of stubborn, stupid defiance. It was along a deserted industrial canal path at dusk, a place I knew was unsafe, but chose precisely because its loneliness mirrored my own, a brittle attempt to reclaim some control. Halfway down the desolate, crumbling stretch, with the canal a black ribbon on my left and a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire on my right, my phone's battery died with a final mocking chirp, plunging the already fading world into a deeper, more profound silence. And that's when I heard them. The footsteps. A steady, unhurried crunch-crunch on the gravel behind me, matching my pace exactly. They slowed when I, choking on a sob, slowed to a walk. They stopped completely when I dared to stop and whirl around, my chest heaving, seeing nothing but the empty path swimming in long, distorted shadows cast by a single, distant security light. "Hello." I called out, my voice a thin, reedy thing swallowed by the vast gloom. Only the echo of my own panic came back. I ran then, truly ran, blind with terror, my muscles screaming, tears of pure panic blurring my vision, until I saw the blessed, familiar glow of my apartment building at the end of the street. I burst through the front door, slamming it shut and engaging the deadbolt and chain with fumbling, numb fingers, then sank to the cool floorboards, my body racked with silent, shuddering sobs. When I could breathe again, I crawled to the window, peeking through a slat in the blinds at the quiet, empty street below, the normalcy a surreal contrast to the horror still ringing in my ears. My phone, now plugged in, chimed with a delayed notification. It was from my cloud storage, a backup service I'd forgotten existed. A new album had been created that evening, titled Our Runs. Inside were dozens of screenshots from a sophisticated mapping program. Each image showed a red line, my route, overlaid with a second, perfectly parallel blue line. The blue line trailed mine by a constant, precise 50 yards, every turn, every pause, every desperate date walk to the river walk, perfectly shadowed. The final image was not a map. It was a photograph, crystal clear, taken from behind and slightly above, of me running along the canal path just minutes ago, my neon running jacket a vivid slash in the gloom, my ponytail swinging. The timestamp glowed in the corner. The blue line on the map for tonight ended not at my apartment door, but in the small, overgrown, wooded grove directly across the street from my building, a parcel of land marked for development, but left forgotten. And as I stared, unable to look away, a light flicked on in the top, boarded-up window of the lone, abandoned house nestled in that grove, a single bare bulb illuminating a figure in a gray hoodie, standing perfectly still, his face still hidden in shadow, but his posture unmistakable. He was looking directly back at me, having already finished his run, already home, waiting for me to finally see him. The race was never against him. It was always for his amusement, and I had been leading him right to my doorstep every single time. They hired him on a Monday, a quiet, lanky man named Elias with a too-firm, slightly damp handshake and eyes the pale gray of a winter sky that never quite held yours, always skittering away at the last second to linger instead on the specific clutter of your desk, the chewed Bic pen you used, the off-brand stapler that always jammed, the framed photo of your dog, Scout, that sat just so. My desk was directly opposite his in the open-plan office. A cruel trick of fate I cursed silently each morning as I felt the constant, low-grade radiation of his attention, a silent hum beneath the fluorescent buzz and the clatter of keyboards. He never spoke much in meetings, just nodded, his gaze fixed on the speaker with an intensity that bordered on hunger, absorbing not just words but cadences, ticks, the way people sip their water. By the third day, he'd memorized my coffee order, a large oat milk latte with 1 raw sugar, and began placing the exact cup from the downstairs cafe on my desk every morning before I arrived, the cardboard sleeve already slightly peeled back, a small, tight nod his only acknowledgement if I was early enough to catch him. He'd finish sentences I muttered under my breath while wrestling with frozen spreadsheets. The sum of column H is off because of the formatting, he'd say softly, without looking up from his own screen, answering a problem I'd only voiced in a whisper to myself. Once, while resetting a password, I typed my mother's maiden name, Vassallo, a name I never used. From his desk, Elias, who was supposedly on a break reading a technical manual, said, "You've misspelled it. It's with a double S and one L. Common error." The room went cold. I called IT, my voice trembling with embarrassment, but they found no keyloggers, no spyware on my machine. Security reviewed camera footage and saw nothing but a man at his desk reading. They called him eager, attentive, and told me to be grateful for a helpful colleague. The dread was a slow, cold drip, an four of anxiety feeding directly into my veins, filling me up in the recycled, stagnant office air. Then the gift started appearing in my top desk drawer, nestled between paperclips and old receipts. A brand new tube of the specific mint-flavored lip balm I'd lost in the break room the week before, still wrapped in plastic. A small box of the exact obscure, non-drowsy allergy medication I took during spring, a brand not sold at local pharmacies. One morning, I found a delicate, tarnished silver brooch in the shape of a swallow, identical to one my late grandmother had owned and which I'd worn as a child. Shown only in a faded Polaroid-era photograph I kept as my password-protected desktop background, a digital shrine no one should have seen. I confronted him in the sterile, lemon-scented break room, my voice a tremulous whisper as the microwave hummed. "Elias, please stop. This isn't appropriate." He blinked those pale, swimming eyes, his expression one of genuine, wounded confusion. "I only want to alleviate your burdens, Clara. I know how heavy they can be." He'd used my name, a name not listed on any public directory. My email still reading C. Miller. I went to HR, armed with a list of incidents that sounded pathetic when spoken aloud, gifts, a correct coffee order, finishing sentences. And with no explicit threats, they offered a tense, mediated conversation, a diplomatic solution that solved nothing. The night before the mediation, working late to avoid being home with my thoughts, I saw him still at his desk long after everyone else had fled, his screen casting a ghastly, undulating blue light on his placid face. He wasn't working. He was scrolling slowly through what looked like my own long-deactivated Facebook timeline, but older, years older. Photos I deleted after a bad breakup, cringe-worthy status updates from college I'd purged, private messages I'd forgotten. I must have gasped aloud because his head snapped toward me with unnatural speed, and for the first time, his gaze locked onto mine unblinking, and he smiled, a thin, stretching of lips that didn't reach his eyes, a crack in a mask. I fled, leaving my coat and bag behind. The next morning, a stone of dread in my stomach, HR called me in. Elias had resigned, effective immediately, clearing out his desk before dawn. He left no forwarding address, no personal effects. The relief was so profound I felt dizzy, almost drunk with it, the weight lifting so suddenly I nearly floated through the next week. It was over. That Friday, finally feeling safe, I decided to cleanse my space, cleaning out my desk drawer for a fresh start. That's when I found the final gift, not inside the drawer, but taped with meticulous care to the underside of my keyboard, a place only someone removing it would ever see. It was a single worn key from an old mechanical typewriter, the letter C smoothed down from thousands of presses. Taped to it was a tiny, perfect square of paper with a handwritten note in that now familiar, neat script. A spare, for when you wear yours out. I'll be seeing you. I threw it in the outside dumpster, my skin crawling, and over the next month, the memory began to soften at the edges, a bad dream fading in the light of a new job with a brighter office and a desk facing a wall, not another person. I was healing. A month into the new role, feeling almost whole again, I was typing a quarterly report. The new keyboard soft clicks a comforting sound. I hit the C key, and it stuck, then came loose in my hand with a faint snap, popping right out of the keyboard mechanism. My breath froze. In the plastic slot where the key stem had broken off, wedged deep inside the guts of the keyboard where no factory defect could ever be, was a tiny, rolled piece of paper, like a secret scroll. I pulled it out with a pair of tweezers, my hands numb and distant. Unfurled, it was a perfect, miniature color photocopy of my new employee badge for my new job, the photo pixel perfect, the issue date matching my first day here. and scrawled across my smiling, hopeful face in that same familiar neat handwriting. The ink smudged slightly from being compressed were the words, "Welcome back. The coffee here is terrible. I'll bring you some tomorrow." The horror wasn't that he had followed me. The horror was the realization that he had always been here, in this new place, waiting. He hadn't needed to follow me at all. He'd simply arrived first, knowing the route I would take long before I'd even decided to run. The scratching in the walls began not with a dramatic bang, but with a subtle, almost polite intrusion, a faint, intermittent skittering behind the plaster in the living room that I, in my new overwhelming solitude, initially blamed on squirrels in the attic or the natural groans of a century-old house settling its bones deeper into the earth. A soundtrack I tried to drown out with wine and white noise apps played through my earbuds. But then it developed an unsettling sentience, a rhythm that echoed my own. It would tap back, once, twice, a soft but distinct scritch-scritch, whenever I dropped a knife or a spoon into the kitchen sink, the metallic clang followed by that whispered reply from the hollow space behind the cupboards. A pause would follow my sneeze, a beat of silence, as if it were tilting its head, then 3 quick, delicate scratches, like fingernails on drywall, a mocking echo of "bless you." My nervous, solitary laugh while watching a comedy would be met with a softer, drier rustle, a papery chuckle from inside the cavity beside the fireplace. It was listening, it was learning, and it was responding. I told myself it was the pipes, the wind catching the loose siding, my own imagination fermenting in the quiet, but the patterns were too precise, the timing too impeccable. I started talking to it, not out of courage, but from a mad, desperate loneliness that had eroded my better judgment. "Stop it," I'd hiss at the baseboard near the floor vent after a particularly loud series of scrapes. A profound, listening silence would reign for hours, a reward that felt more like a predator's patience. Then, one night, after a disastrous video call with a distant friend that left me feeling more disconnected than ever, I broke down weeping on the couch. From the vent near my feet came 3 slow, drawn-out drags, a sympathetic, sighing sound that was horrifyingly comforting. It had become my confidant, and that realization curdled my blood. I had a friend over for the first time in months, a brave attempt at normalcy. We drank wine, laughed loudly about old college exploits, the house filling with a warmth it had lacked for years. The entire time, the house was silent, blessedly, miraculously silent. It was hiding. When she left, hugging me at the door, I sighed with a mix of exhaustion and relief, saying aloud to the empty hallway, "Finally, some peace." Before the words had fully left my lips, 3 angry, sharp, tearing scrapes ripped through the wall, directly behind the couch, a sound of such violent punctuation that I jumped, my wine glass slipping from my hand to shatter on the hardwood. It was jealous. It had been listening the whole time, seething in its hidden tunnels, and now it was punishing me for finding solace in another. The climax came during a blistering phone argument with my mother, old wounds ripped open, my voice rising to a raw shout in the center of the living room. As I slammed the landline receiver down onto its cradle with a final cracking thud, a tremendous, furious bang exploded within the wall, a sound of such sheer, rupturing force that the entire structure shook, a framed picture of a generic landscape crashing to the floor, the glass splintering. A jagged, lightning bolt crack splintered the plaster from ceiling to floor, and a fine dust of ancient lath and insulation sifted into the air. I screamed, frozen to the spot, staring at the dark fissure that now seemed to breathe. Then, from within that darkness, so clear and intimate it could have been someone lying next to me on the couch, their lips an inch from my ear, came a perfect, whispered mimicry of my mother's voice, but distilled to pure, dripping venom. "You ungrateful child. You'll die alone in this house." Before I could react, the voice shifted, melting seamlessly into my own voice, the one I use when I'm truly shattered, a sound I'd only ever heard inside the prison of my own skull. "Please don't leave me. Everyone leaves. It's just us now." I called the police, who poked around the attic with flashlights and found nothing but dust. I called an exterminator, who set traps that remained eternally unsprung. I, even in my delirium, called a priest who walked through with a stoic expression, sprinkled holy water on the crack, and left without a word, his silence more damning than any prayer. The repairman came the next week, whistling along to the radio as he slathered joint compound over the fissure, sealing the mouth shut. The silence that followed was total, absolute, and infinitely more terrifying than the sounds. It was the silence of a hell breath, of a deep personal offense taken, of something waiting with infinite patience for me to understand that the conversation was not over on its terms. The final message arrived yesterday, not in the wall, but in my physical mailbox, a small, lumpy cardboard parcel with no postage, no return address, just my name written in a spidery, unfamiliar hand. Inside, nestled in yellowed newspaper, was an old dust-caked audio cassette tape, the kind my father used in his dictaphone decades ago. With a sense of doom that felt like walking to my own gallows, I dug an old player out of a storage box, my hand shaking so badly I could barely thread the tape. I pressed play, the speakers hissing with the empty, room tone of my own house. Then my own voice, clear and unabashed, filled my headphones. It was me, singing in the shower, a private, off-key rendition of a lullaby my grandmother used to sing, a memory I hadn't accessed in years. The sound was intimate, muffled by the shower spray, but unmistakable. A recording no one could have made. The shower recording ended with the squeak of a faucet being turned off. Then a new sound began, and my heart stopped. It was the slow, rhythmic, grinding drag of a razor blade being scraped deliberately, methodically, across the other side of the thin bathroom wall, directly behind the shower head. Each scrape was imperfect, sickening time with the slow drip, drip, drip of the leaky faucet I still, to this day, have never fixed. It was a recording of the other side of the wall. It was a recording of what was there while I was naked, vulnerable, and singing. The tape didn't end with the scraping. After a final, drawn-out metallic screech, my own voice returned, but this time it was a whisper, sleep-thick and terrifyingly close to the microphone. I know you're there. I can hear you breathing. Don't stop. The tape clicked off. The house is silent again. But now, I realize the silence was never empty. It was just it listening. And I have just confirmed to it, in my own voice, that I am listening back. The game has changed. The walls are no longer a barrier. They are a membrane. And, on the other side, something has been practicing my voice, learning my fears, and waiting for me to invite it in. Every drip of the faucet now sounds like a countdown. It began not with a shock, but with a slow, corrosive drip of things being subtly out of place, a series of minor dissonances in the symphony of my solitary life that I first attributed to stress, to forgetfulness, to the brain fog that had clung to me since the pandemic. The toothbrush would be damp in the morning when I was certain I'd let it dry overnight, the bristles ever so slightly splayed as if used. The novel on my bedside table would be a quarter-inch to the left of where I'd left my bookmark, the spine creased on a page I didn't recall reading. The hum of the refrigerator, a constant white noise backdrop, would occasionally shift to a different, flatter pitch for an hour before returning to normal. I blamed sleepwalking, drafted a note to see a doctor, and tried to ignore the growing chill in my apartment that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The first real crack in my reality appeared at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, parched and disoriented, shuffling to the kitchen for water. In the dark window's reflection, a black square framed by my sleep-rumpled hair, I saw the silhouette of someone still lying in my bed. I stood frozen, the cool linoleum seeping into my bare feet, my eyes locked not on the bedroom door, but on its reflection in the window. In that reflected world, a shape, my shape, sat up slowly in the bed, turned his head, and looked directly at the reflection of me, standing illuminated by the faint glow of the microwave clock. We stared at each other through 2 layers of glass, the window and my own wide, terrified eyes, a silent, impossible standoff. I flicked on the kitchen light, shattering the moment. The bedroom, when I crept to the doorway, heart hammering, was empty, the sheets rumpled only in the shape of my own body. My reflection in the now black window showed just me, alone, pale and clutching a glass of water. I spent the next week rationalizing. A hypnopompic hallucination, a trick of shadow and exhausted mind. But the displacements grew bolder, more personal. I'd find notes in my own looping handwriting on the grocery list pad I kept on the fridge, items added beneath my own. Milk, eggs, more light bulbs, the dark is growing. Smile more, he's always watching. My television would turn on by itself at 3:33 a.m., the screen filled with buzzing gray static, the volume on a low, insistent murmur. One morning, defeated, I trudged into the kitchen to find my coffee already made, steaming in my favorite mug, cream and sugar stirred in exactly the way I liked it, the spoon resting clean in the sink. The final proof, the evidence I could not explain away, was the camera. I set up an old smartphone on a high bookshelf in the living room, its cracked screen pointed at the main space, set to record all night on a loop. I reviewed the footage the next dawn with a dry mouth and trembling hands, fast-forwarding through hours of empty, grayscale stillness. Then, at 3:15 a.m., my sleeping form walked into the frame. But I was the one watching the recording. I saw myself, or the body that housed me, eyes closed, face slack with a profound emptiness of deep sleep, moving with a serene, gliding grace. It walked to the couch, sat down, picked up a book I'd been reading, and held it open, staring at the same page for a solid hour without ever turning it. The me on the camera was the sleeper, the automaton. The me watching was the witness, the prisoner. Which one was real? The video cut to a blizzard of static at exactly 3:33 a.m. When the image resolved, the couch was empty. The camera then panned, a smooth, impossible, sweeping motion for a device fixed to a shelf, to the left, until it was focused on the bookshelf itself, on the very spot where it was sitting. In the reflection of its own lens, a convex, fisheye distortion, was a close-up of my own face, wide awake, eyes bright and knowing, smiling a small, secretive smile I have never felt my muscles make. My reflection's hand in the lens reached out, a finger extending toward the camera's eye, and the screen went permanently, irrevocably black. I destroyed the phone, hammering it into shards of plastic and silicon in a blind panic. I am writing this now in the full, unforgiving light of day, and everything seems normal, deceptively placid. But I am caught in a silent, static terror that has rewired my every thought. Because the me that misplaced the toothbrush, the me that wrote those cryptic notes, the me that sat blankly on the couch, holding a dead book, that me is inside here, sharing this skull, looking out through my eyes, borrowing my hands to stir my coffee. And the me that woke up thirsty, the me that set the camera, the me that is typing these words right now in a desperate bid to document this invasion. Which one of us is the original occupant of this skin? And which one is the subtle, sly, and patient squatter who has been moving my things, tasting my coffee, and living slices of my life piece by piece, waiting for the final, seamless switch to be thrown? The most horrifying question is no longer about what is in the house with me. The question is, which one of me is the house, and which one is the ghost? Don't check your reflection too closely, not in a dark window, not in a still monitor, not in the back of a spoon. It might be having the exact same thought at the exact same time, and it might be wondering, with a cold curiosity, what it will do with you once it finally decides it no longer needs a witness to its life. The fight isn't against something in the mirror. The fight is for the right to be the one who decides to look away.